It was a shocking act of violence that reverberated across London. A gunman on a powerful motorbike firing 6 shots in 2 seconds outside a busy restaurant in Dalston. The intended targets were a group of men eating at an outdoor table, but the first bullet shattered the glass and hit a 9-year-old girl in the head. She was just eating ice cream. Police described her survival as a miracle. She spent over 3 months in the hospital, and her skull had to be rebuilt with titanium. The bullet is still lodged in her brain, and she faces a lifetime of physical and cognitive challenges. This horrific event wasn't a random attack. It was a carefully planned assassination attempt, and it was just one more chapter in a brutal, decades-long gang war. Police believe the feud between the two rival gangs, the Tottenham Turks and the Hackney Turks, is behind more than 20 murders over the past 2 decades. At the heart of the conflict are 2 men, Kemal Armagan of the Hackney Turks and Izzet Eren of the Tottenham Turks. The war between them and their associates has seen members of the public, their families, and even their own gang members murdered and maimed on the streets of London and across Europe. The spark that ignited this fire came in the early hours of January 24, 2009. A fight broke out at a snooker hall in North London. Kemal Armagan, a leading figure in the Hackney Turks, was beaten up. He told police at the time, "I'm old school. I'll sort it out myself," and he did. What followed was a swift and bloody escalation. That year alone, the feud was directly linked to 31 shootings, 4 arsons, 5 stabbings, and 3 murders. The violence became a vicious cycle of retaliation. The Hackney Turks' E5 Social Club was sprayed with machine gun fire in March 2009. Later that year, Izzet Eren of the Tottenham Turks was shot at 12 times but escaped uninjured. Weeks later, fellow Tottenham Turk Oktay Erbasli was shot dead by a man on a motorbike. Just 3 days after that, a gunman opened fire with a submachine gun at the E5 Social Club, killing 21-year-old Cem Düzgün, who was not believed to be the intended target. Prosecutors said it was a hit ordered by Kemal Eren as revenge for the shooting of Erbasli. The war continued to rage with lethal consequences. In February 2012, Ali Armagan, Kemal's brother, was shot dead in his car. His death led to a further hit in Turkey in December that same year, where Kemal Eren was shot and left paralyzed. Then in April 2013, the war claimed a new leader. Zafer Eren, then head of the Tottenham Turks, was shot dead in Southgate. His younger brother, Izzet Eren, stepped up to lead the gang, ensuring the cycle of violence would continue. Izzet Eren was a major player, but he was also a man who had a knack for escaping. In 2014, he was wanted for a revenge shooting in Turkey, but he escaped from prison and made his way back to the UK. Police stopped him in October 2015 on a stolen motorbike, armed with a pistol and a Scorpion submachine gun. They believed he was on his way to avenge his brother Zafer's murder. While being taken to court for firearms offenses, Izzet Eren's gang attempted a daring prison van escape. The Metropolitan Police had intelligence of the plot, and during the operation, a police marksman fatally shot Jermaine Baker, one of the men recruited to help with the escape. Izzet Eren was jailed for 14 years and transferred to a Turkish prison, but he escaped again just a month later. His younger brother, Hussein, was murdered on a holiday to Turkey in 2020, sparking yet another wave of violence. That year alone, police intelligence linked the Tottenham Turks to 3 fatal shootings and 4 threat-to-life warnings. The gang was even linked by a judge to the murder of DJ Kore Alpergin, who was kidnapped, tortured, and killed in October 2022. The war came full circle last year in Moldova, where Izzet Eren, who had been granted bail on an asylum claim, was shot and killed as he sat outside a cafe. The suspect? Kemal Armagan, wearing a camouflage outfit. He allegedly fired 7 shots into Eren's back and head, killing him instantly in what was a clear act of revenge. Police in Turkey confirmed that Kemal Armagan was arrested just a few months ago, on March 10th of this year. Now, with both leaders killed or arrested, you might think the war is over. But experts say the bloodshed is far from finished. Tony Saggers, former head of drugs threat and intelligence for the National Crime Agency, says Turkish organized crime groups have filled the demand for heroin in the UK since the 1970s. These gangs mirror legitimate trade routes, bringing drugs from Afghanistan through Iran and into Europe. The Hackney Turks, or the Bombasalers, were once led by a man known as the Emperor, who was said to be responsible for importing some 90% of all heroin into the UK. The control of these criminal markets is what fuels the conflict. Criminology expert Dr. Mahmoud Cengiz believes the killing of Izzet Eren sends a strong message. He says that if you are able to kill a group leader, it means you are the most powerful organization. But that power dynamic is fragile and temporary. Dr. Cengiz predicts a strong response from the Tottenham Turks, who will have to attack the Hackney bombers and their high-level people to show they are still active. And so, the cycle of violence continues. For now, the men behind the Dalston shooting are either convicted or at large. The gunman on the stolen Ducati Monster remains free, and police are offering a reward of up to £15,000 for information. The brutal reality is that this long-running feud has cost countless lives, but perhaps its most tragic victim is the 9-year-old girl who was simply eating ice cream with her family, caught in the crossfire of a war that began with a slap. In the dark underworld of Irish organized crime, certain names echo with an unsettling violence, but few rival the chilling legacy of a single family, the Wilsons. They were not just criminals, they were Ireland's first family of contract assassins. The family structure was simple, their business deadly. Brothers John, Keith, and Eric, their cousin Alan, their nephew Luke, hailing from Ballyfermot, Dublin, they carved a trail of bodies across Europe. A trail rooted in drug disputes, betrayal, and a cold-blooded willingness to kill for hire. While John was the eldest, it was Eric Wilson who would become the most notorious. A drug-fueled psycho, his career began not with a high-profile hit, but with an act of intimate betrayal. The murder of his own former best friend Martin Kenny in 2005, following a petty dispute over missing drugs. This initial act unlocked a monstrous appetite. As a hitman, Eric Wilson was unmatched in his brutality and his sheer volume of contract slayings. At the height of his rampage, his fee wasn't just cash. It was a staggering kilo of pure cocaine, worth over €70,000 on the streets, for his own personal use. This was not a business. This was a descent into a coked-up, murderous addiction. This is the shocking true story of a family that turned murder into a high-demand service. A family that left a trail of more than a dozen bodies strewn across Ireland, the north, and the sun-drenched Costa del Sol. This is the story of the Hitmen. One of the most savage details of Eric Wilson's early career involves a man named Roy Coddington. Coddington was a former drug dealer, desperately trying to protect himself. He had been threatened and beaten by dissident Republican extortionists and needed a gun, a Glock handgun, for protection. In a move he thought was clever, Coddington approached Wilson. He had something Wilson needed to protect, an alibi. Months earlier, Coddington had, by sheer chance, witnessed Eric Wilson carrying out a broad daylight hit in Drogheda. Wilson, then just 23, had been hired by fingless drug baron Martin Marlowe Hyland to kill a man named Paul Ree. Coddington saw the whole thing. He didn't threaten Wilson with exposure, but he reminded him that he had kept his mouth shut. This, Coddington believed, was his ace in the hole, enough to convince the young hitman to sell him a weapon. Wilson appeared to agree. The meeting was set for a secluded spot at Mornington Beach, near Drogheda, on March 22, 2007. At around 4 p.m., Coddington parked his van. He got into a blue Ford Focus where Eric and his getaway driver waited. The car drove down a sandy track toward the dunes. But this was no arms deal. It was a fatal double-cross. Coddington was dragged from the vehicle and into the dunes. Wilson immediately pulled a gun and fired. A shot to the chest. As the stunned victim lay there, bleeding on the sand, begging for his life, Eric Wilson leaned over him. He fired 2 more bullets into Coddington's head. The 2 men sped away, leaving the body behind. Unbelievably, just meters away, on the other side of the dunes, a German woman and her 4 children were walking. She came upon the scene, tried desperately to comfort Coddington in his last moments, but his injuries were too serious. He died there. For Gardaí, the murder was initially baffling. It was only later, through relentless investigation, that the chilling truth emerged. Coddington wasn't killed over drugs or a feud. He was executed to silence the only witness to Wilson's previous contract killing. It was the third murder attributed to the rising hitman. After the two Drogheda murders, Eric Wilson was in high demand. His reputation for cold-blooded efficiency earned him a spot on the roster of Ireland's biggest crime syndicate, the Kinahan Cartel. His first major contract for the cartel took him out of Ireland and into the Spanish Sun. In February 2008, he tracked down fugitive Dublin gangster Paddy Doyle. Doyle had been caught with his fingers in the till, blamed by the Kinahans for the disappearance of up to €500,000 of cartel cash. Wilson gunned him down. The work was lucrative, and the contracts kept coming. Later that summer, in a chilling demonstration of his mobility, Wilson flew to Belfast using one of his many false passports. The target, drug trafficker David Babyface Lindsay and his associate Alan Napper. This hit was arranged by a local rival, Micah the Panda Kelly, who lured Lindsay to a remote Co-Down house on the pretense of settling a dispute. Instead, Eric Wilson was waiting. Lindsay and Napper were never seen again. Disposing of bodies so that they vanished without a trace became one of Eric Wilson's grim specialties. Subsequent PSNI searches of the house revealed only traces of Lindsay's blood. Intelligence indicated Wilson's preferred method. He would bury his victims in lime-lined pits to accelerate decomposition and ensure nothing was left for police to find. He is the chief suspect in the disappearance and probable execution of a man named Alan Campbell in the south of Spain, around the same time. He is also believed to have executed another drug addict turned hitman, Christy Gilroy, in 2009 on behalf of a rival crime boss, simply to stop Gilroy from turning state's evidence if arrested. Gardaí sources confirmed that much of this cold-blooded activity was fueled by Wilson's catastrophic cocaine addiction. When he demanded a kilo of cocaine as his fee, it was for his own personal use. A source told the authors of The Hitmen, "Everybody we spoke to told us that if and when you do catch up with him, he won't be taken alive." Wilson was a time bomb of violence and paranoia, ticking down to an inevitable self-destructive end. For all his planning, his false passports, and his careful disposal of evidence, Eric Wilson's undoing came not from a massive Garda operation, but from a petty argument in a Spanish bar. It was the night of June 5, 2010. Wilson was drinking at an expat pub in the coastal town of Mijas. In a coked-up rage, he got into a row over a girl. The girl told a British criminal, a towering man known as Tall Dan Smith, that Wilson was groping her leg. Smith, no shrinking violet himself, wanted back in England for blowing off another man's fingers, ordered the diminutive Dubliner to leave. Eric Wilson stormed off, vowing revenge. He returned armed with a 9mm Parabellum pistol. He shot Tall Dan Smith 7 times. In a shocking display of personal, vicious rage, one bullet went through each of the Englishman's testicles. This time there were dozens of witnesses. The police were quickly alerted. Spanish authorities, forewarned by the Gardaí about the dangerous nature of their target, eventually tracked Wilson down to a rural ranch called the Hacienda San Bargo, outside the inland village of Coin. They sent in the bomb squad. What they found confirmed everything the police had suspected about the pure danger Eric Wilson represented. In an unlocked shed, they discovered a military arsenal, an M79 armor-piercing anti-tank grenade, 2 military pineapple grenades, 2 half-kilo slabs of PTN plastique explosive, and 180 rounds of AK-47 ammunition. Inside his bedside locker were aluminium electric detonators for the plastique and manuals on how to use it all. Fortunately, he would never get the chance. Wilson was convicted of the murder of Tall Dan Smith, the hitman whose fee was a kilo of cocaine and whose signature was a lime-lined grave, was jailed for 28 years. Eric Wilson's capture and conviction was a seismic blow, but the criminal family structure did not immediately collapse. His brother, Keith Wilson, was also caught and is now serving a life sentence for the contract slaying of Daniel Gaynor in Finglas, just months after Eric's arrest in Spain. The eldest brother, John Wilson, suspected of shooting up a Dublin pub, was himself murdered in September 2012. Their cousin, Alan Wilson, was charged with and acquitted of the horrific 2008 abduction and murder of Romanian girl Mariara Rostas in Dublin. However, Alan and the youngest of the clan, nephew Luke Wilson, were later jailed together in 2017 for their role in a Kinnan cartel plot to murder Hutch figure Gary Hanley. The sheer scope of their violence is almost incomprehensible. A father, a brother, a cousin, a nephew, all bound by the same destructive trade. The Wilson clan left behind a wake of unimaginable devastation. They were the ultimate manifestation of Ireland's gangland evolution. A tightly knit family unit that perfected the trade of contract killing, escalating their price from cash to kilos of cocaine, and their reach from Ballyfermot to the Costa del Sol. Their story is a dark monument to the corrosive power of drug money and absolute violence, a testament to how quickly a family can go from a single crime to an absolute dynasty of destruction. Recent reports indicate that two Scottish men, identified as Eddie Lyons Jr. and Ross Monaghan, were shot dead at a bar in Fuengirola, Andalusia, Spain on Saturday evening, May 31, 2025. Here's what is known so far. A masked gunman reportedly opened fire on the two men outside Monaghan's bar on the seafront. The attack occurred just after 11 p.m. local time. Victims: Eddie Lyons Jr. is understood to have links to criminal gangs. Ross Monaghan was previously acquitted of a notorious gangland murder in Scotland. He is also reportedly registered as the owner of Monaghan's pub, where the shooting took place. Both men are believed to be linked to the Lyons crime family in Glasgow. Motive: Spanish officials are investigating the killings and have not ruled out a link to organized crime. There are suggestions that the shooting may be connected to an ongoing gang war in Scotland, possibly between the Lyons and Daniel crime families. The Costa del Sol has also seen a number of similar shootings in recent weeks, some believed to be related to drug crime. Spanish authorities are leading the investigation, with officers from the region's Specialist and Violent Crime Unit involved. No arrests have been made yet, but roadblocks were reportedly set up in the area after the shooting. The date was November 24, 2022. The place was Kilburn Drive, a quiet residential street in Wigan. It was a freezing cold, rainy Thursday evening. For residents of this peaceful enclave, the only worry was getting home out of the elements. But shortly before 7 p.m., a passerby made a horrific discovery: a body lying on the pavement. The scene that greeted the first police officers was unlike anything they'd encountered. The body was covered in a mysterious white powder, disfigured by an unknown substance. This wasn't just a homicide. It was immediately treated as a potential CBRN incident: chemical, biological, radioactive, nuclear. For Detective Gina Brennan and Detective Lee Shaw, the senior investigators, the case was instantly different. They couldn't even approach the body for the first 24 hours. They knew nothing. Not the victim's identity, nor their gender. The crime scene was a toxic, bewildering enigma. Detective Ishaw knew the area, full of elderly residents and bungalows. It just didn't fit the bill, he recalled. The theories were desperate. Had the body fallen from a plane? Was this a body dump from another town? They were running blind. But there was one piece of luck: a recording from a nearby house. The recording captured a loud bang roughly 15 minutes before the body was found. It was a firearm. The killing happened right here, in this quiet spot. And with that knowledge, the victim was eventually identified: Liam Smith, a 38-year-old electrician and father of two. The post-mortem confirmed the calculated brutality. Liam had been shot in the face at close range, and then, as he lay dying, doused in sulfuric acid and soda crystals. This wasn't random violence. This was a message. This was personal. Detective Brennan described it as a true whodunit. No witnesses, no known enemies, no immediate motive. The murder squad faced a monumental task: to find the person behind this military-grade execution. For 6 long weeks, the investigation was divided into 3 main lines of inquiry: Liam Smith's background, the weapon, and a specific vehicle. That vehicle was a dark Mitsubishi Shogun seen near the crime scene. This SUV was the killer's ghost. It had left very few tracks. They had the vehicle, but the registration plate was a known clone. It was a dead end until a detective reviewing dashcam footage hit the jackpot. A piece of footage from 3 weeks before the murder showed the same Shogun using a different cloned plate, R22 Aura. This single clue was the thread that would unravel the entire case. The plate led police to a man who had arranged its purchase, and that man led them to the killer, Michael Hillier, a 39-year-old drug dealer from Sheffield. The surveillance footage proved Hillier had traveled from Sheffield to Wigan 3 weeks before the killing for hostile reconnaissance, casing Liam Smith's house. On the day of the murder, he had sat waiting in the Shogun, armed for nearly 10 hours before luring Liam out. This was a patient, cold-blooded plan. Hillier was arrested. He answered, no comment to every question. But a look into his car insurance policy revealed a second name registered to the vehicle. Rachel Fulstow. Rachel Fulstow, a 37-year-old property management worker from York, was brought in as a witness. Her first words were chilling. Before police could state the purpose of the interview, she asked, "Is this about Liam Smith?" Liam's identity had not been publicly confirmed. How did she know? Fulstow confessed she had known Liam. She told officers they had met on Tinder in 2019 and had a one-night stand, followed by lunch the next day. But Det Ins Shaw still remembers the phone call that provided the true motivation. Fulstow had claimed the sexual encounter was non-consensual. When she met Michael Hillier in 2021, she disclosed the incident to him. Hillier, who claimed he was besotted with her, was outraged. He claimed Fulstow told him she had been graphically raped. The pair made a catastrophic decision. They would not go to the police. They would seek justice themselves. In his testimony, Hillier stated, "We decided jointly we would deal with the matter ourselves and go down the vigilante route." It was a horrific vigilante plot, hatched over 10 months, culminating in a shotgun and acid attack. Hillier was the executioner, but the evidence would prove Fulstow was the architect, the planner, and the driving force. The case against Fulstow solidified with her digital footprint. Despite claiming innocence and fear of Hillier, her computer searches told a story of a woman deeply involved in the plot. Searches made days before the murder included, "How long does it take a car to burn?" A clear reference to the Shogun Hillier used and later torched. Another search was for Liam Smith's name on a local newspaper website before his identity was publicized. Even more damning were the searches made after the murder but before her arrest. Premeditated. And does acid corrode stainless steel? She was calculating the legal repercussions of their actions, not reacting out of shock. The ultimate act of callous disregard came just days after Liam Smith was brutally killed. Fulstow and Hillier flew to Jamaica together for a pre-planned 2-week holiday. While police worked tirelessly to identify the mystery body on the street, the killers were sunbathing. Within 4 weeks of her initial interview, Rachel Fulstow had moved from a witness to a full murder suspect. She was arrested, joining Hillier in custody. The pair, once partners in crime and in love, turned on each other during the trial. Hillier claimed Fulstow was the mastermind, constantly reminding him of the alleged rape to keep the vigilante plot on track. Fulstow claimed Hillier was an abusive drug dealer and she was simply too terrified to tell the truth. But the prosecution held the winning card, a covert recording of Hillier speaking candidly in prison. It was, as DCI Brennan said, an excellent piece of evidence, detailing everything both of them had done. The blame game was over. The jury quickly returned their verdicts. Both Michael Hillier and Rachel Fulstow were found guilty of murder. The presiding judge delivered a powerful statement. He described their murder of Liam Smith as brutal and cold-blooded. They had decided, he said, to act as judge, jury, and executioner. Michael Hillier, the gunman, was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 33 years in prison. Rachel Fulstow, the architect of the vigilante revenge plot, was jailed for a minimum of 30 years. The family of Liam Smith were finally given the answers they deserved, but his sister spoke of the added devastation of having his name tainted by the unproven accusations of the killers. Liam Smith was, as his family stated, the most kind soul, a devoted family man, robbed of his dignity and his life. The detectives connected deeply with the case. A man murdered in a quiet community, simply for a past encounter his killer couldn't tolerate. For DCI Brennan and DI Shaw, it was a demanding, complex investigation that started with nothing and was built piece by piece on a single cloned number plate. They had solved the most unusual of cases, an actual whodunit. The two vigilantes, who sought to exact their own distorted version of justice, will now spend the majority of their lives behind bars. But for Liam Smith's two boys, they will spend the rest of theirs without their dad. Hello and welcome. Today we're stepping back in time to an event that shook Manchester's criminal underworld to its core. An event so shocking it has been seared into the city's memory, and one that remains a grim cautionary tale. We're going back to Sunday, March 12, 2006. The place is the Brass Handles, a flat-roofed pub in the heart of Pendleton, Salford. On the surface, it's just a regular, bustling pub. The air is filled with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the roar of a football match on the TV. It's half-time, and Manchester United is up 2-0 against Newcastle. For many of the regulars packed inside, it's a perfect Sunday afternoon. But for a few, this day will be anything but normal. This day, the shadows of Manchester's gangland will step into the light and leave a trail of death that would ripple through the city for years to come. To understand what happened in the Brass Handles, you have to understand the players and the deep-seated rivalries that had long defined the city's criminal landscape. At the center of this story are three distinct groups. First, the old guard of the Salford underworld, figures like Bobby Spears, a close friend of the man known as Salford's Mr. Big, Paul Massey. Spears, a seasoned veteran of the streets, was a figure of respect and fear. Then there was the Doddington gang from Moss Side. This was a crew known for its ruthlessness, and its founder, Ian McLeod, was a figure all but retired from the front lines of crime, but still held immense power. And finally, the young men on the rise, a new generation seeking to make their mark. One of these was David Totten, a hardman whose burgeoning reputation was beginning to demand attention and to step on the toes of the established powers. The feud that led to this day was personal. For some reason, David Totten had become a problem for Bobby Spears. The full story has never been made public, but police believe it stemmed from a public humiliation. Months before the shooting, Totten was refused entry to a Manchester nightclub. He tried to get in by name-dropping Spears, who was already inside. The doorman fetched Spears, who feigned ignorance and denied knowing Totten, leaving him to be turned away and embarrassed. It might have seemed like a harmless joke to Spears, a way to put a cocky young man in his place. But in the world of gangland pride, this was a massive insult. Totten's response was a bold, almost provocative one. He started drinking in Spears' local, the Brass Handles. It was a clear message, a move designed to spook his rival. And it worked. Spears became worried. He decided the only way to deal with Totten was to have him killed. Spears hired Ian McLeod, the Doddington crew leader, for the hit. The price was £10,000. McLeod, in turn, chose two young men to carry out the assassination. Carlton Alvarenga, 20, and Richard Austin, 19. They weren't seasoned killers. They were, by all accounts, terrified. They weren't doing this for the money. Police later learned they were in debt to McLeod, and this was their way of paying it off. This was a mission they were forced to take. McLeod drove them to the pub in his Ford Mondeo. He parked nearby, waiting. His part of the job was done. It was up to the young men to walk into one of Salford's toughest pubs and carry out the hit. Inside the Brass Handles, another key player was in position. Connie Howarth, a convicted gun runner, was at the bar. She was the spotter. Her job was to keep an eye on David Totten and his friends, who were in the pub's snooker room. She was on her mobile phone, ready to send a discreet message to McLeod with Totten's precise location. A woman known as the Black Widow, she was a veteran of this world, cool and collected. As Alvarenga and Austin were making their way to the pub, she was in the ladies' room, touching up her lipstick. A moment of chilling calm before the storm. At 2:45 p.m., a few minutes into the second half of the United-Newcastle game, a chilling signal went out. Totten was seated at a table, surrounded by his friends. He was right where they wanted him. Alvarenga and Austin were ready. They were armed with handguns, sent into a crowded pub to kill a man they barely knew. As they entered the pub, all eyes were on the football game. But soon, all eyes would be on them. Sound of a pub door swinging open. The noise of the pub stops abruptly, replaced by the sound of gunshots, 6 in total, and screams. The soundscape becomes chaotic and loud. 6 shots. 6 times they fired into David Totten's chest. Another man, Aaron Travers, jumped in front of his friend, taking 2 bullets meant for Totten. Totten incredibly survived, but in the immediate chaos, the plan fell apart. Austin's gun jammed. The men at the table, Totten's friends, didn't run. They reacted. They turned the tables on the hitman, literally. They upended a table, using it as a shield. And then, a moment that shocked everyone, they disarmed the would-be assassins and in a horrifying twist, shot them with their own guns. Mortally wounded, Alvarenga and Austin staggered out of the pub and onto a grass verge outside. They collapsed and died there. The aftermath was a scene of utter silence. The first police on the scene found 2 bodies a few meters from the pub, but inside there was nothing. The pub was empty. The CCTV system was gone. Not a single person who had been in the pub that day would talk. The Salford Code of Omerta was at work, a wall of silence that seemed impenetrable. It was a nightmare for detectives. With no witnesses and no evidence from the scene, the case seemed destined to remain unsolved. But the police found 2 burner phones on the grass near the bodies. And from that small piece of evidence, they began to unravel the whole story. The phones were the key. One had been topped up with a loyalty card. That card led police to an incriminating web of communications between Spears, McLeod, and Howarth, proving they were the ones who orchestrated the hit. While the 2 young men who died in the street have never had justice for their murders, the masterminds behind the hit were brought to justice. Spears, McLeod, and Howarth were all eventually convicted of conspiracy to murder, thanks to the painstaking work of detectives who refused to be defeated by the code of silence. They were sentenced to life, a testament to the police's determination. The Brass Handles was eventually demolished, but the story of that day, the terror, the betrayal, and the shocking turn of events remains a defining moment in the history of Manchester's criminal underworld. It's a reminder of the brutal consequences of gangland ambition and a testament to the lives lost in its wake. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and share. Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. Today, we're diving deep into the dark world of encrypted crime, a world where criminals thought they could hide behind anonymous handles, communicating in the shadows, orchestrating heinous acts with just a few taps on a screen. This is the story of Operation Venetic, the global police takedown of the EncroChat network, and one of the most dangerous criminals to be unmasked, Philip Waugh, known to his underworld clients as Ace Prospect. For years, EncroChat was the go-to communication tool for Europe's most serious organized crime groups. It promised a safe, untraceable way to do business, from drug trafficking to weapons dealing and even murder for hire. Users had special phones that wiped all data with a single button press. They used anonymous handles, thinking they were invisible to law enforcement. But what they didn't know was that European police forces, led by the National Crime Agency, or NCA, were watching. In early 2020, they finally broke through. In an operation so massive it was codenamed Operation Venetic, investigators infiltrated the network, gaining access to millions of messages. It was like a window into the mind of organized crime, and what they saw was chilling. Among the millions of users, one handle stood out: Ace Prospect. This individual wasn't just a regular criminal. They were a one-stop shop for serious firepower. The messages uncovered a shocking list of military-grade weapons for sale across the UK: AK-47 assault rifles, Scorpion submachine guns, Uzis, and a whole range of pistols. This wasn't just a side hustle. It was an armory for a criminal underworld. The NCA immediately launched a massive hunt to unmask the man behind the handle. Who was this person, operating from abroad, supplying such a terrifying arsenal? Investigators traced Ace Prospect to a villa in Benahavís, Malaga, on Spain's Costa del Sol. And in September of last year, they made their move. The man behind the handle was revealed to be a 39-year-old from the Warrington area, Philip Waugh. He was arrested, extradited back to the UK, and brought before Liverpool Crown Court. In court, Waugh pleaded guilty to a long list of charges, including conspiracy to possess and transfer prohibited weapons. But that wasn't the most shocking part of the case. The EncroChat messages revealed a deeper, more horrific layer to his crimes. Philip Waugh didn't just sell weapons. He orchestrated horrific acts of violence. The messages between him and a notorious hitman named Jonathan Gordon who went by the handle Valued Bridge, painted a picture of pure, cold-blooded cruelty. Gordon offered his services for cash, £6,000 for an acid attack, £10,000 to blind a victim, and Waugh, using his handle, was a ruthless client. In one seized exchange, he ordered Gordon to double the dose, bro, acid him and bird proper. I just want his face melted. The conversation was full of casual boasts about the strength of the chemicals and plans to ensure maximum damage was done. They even talked about an earlier attack where a man had managed to wash the acid off, with Waugh suggesting they should have stabbed him in the leg to prevent it. Jonathan Gordon wasn't just talking. He hurled acid into the face of a man named Lee Deacon and was involved in a series of shootings, including one where a bullet flew through the window of an elderly couple's home. These messages, which had been meant to be secret, laid bare the sheer brutality and disregard for human life these men had. Gordon was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But the man who hired him, the man who ordered the attacks, was Philip Waugh. This case, and others like it, highlight the incredible work of law enforcement in bringing these hidden criminals into the light. The NCA's senior investigating officer, Ben Rutter, said it best. He supplied an array of terrifying automatic and semi-automatic weaponry to offenders who were planning horrific crimes. He didn't care at all about who might be killed in the process. He only cared about money. Waugh's right-hand man, Robert Brazendale, had already been sentenced to over a decade in prison for his role in transferring some of these same weapons. Now, it's Philip Waugh's turn. Both men will be sentenced soon, bringing a close to this chapter of Operation Venetic. This story is a stark reminder of the hidden dangers of the criminal underworld and the crucial work of law enforcement to penetrate those shadows. The takedown of EncroChat has revealed a world of unimaginable cruelty and violence, and it's brought some of the most dangerous criminals to justice. It shows that even behind a digital handle, there's no place to hide from the law. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments below what you think about the EncroChat takedown and the pursuit of criminals like Philip Waugh. Welcome, brave listeners, to Underworld Chronicles, where the shadows hold secrets and legends walk among us. Today, we rip back the curtain on a figure whispered about in hushed tones, a man whose very name sends shivers down the spine of Ireland's criminal elite. We delve into the life of Gerard Hutch, but you know him better as the Monk. Born on April 11, 1963, in the unforgiving streets of Dublin, Gerard Hutch isn't just a name on a police file. He's an enigma, a paradox wrapped in a riddle. At 62, he's not merely a survivor in the brutal world of organized crime. He's a kingpin, a meticulous strategist, and the alleged architect of a criminal empire. But how does a man, supposedly at the pinnacle of international gangsterism, earn a nickname like the Monk? A title that conjures images of quiet contemplation, not cold-blooded power? The moniker, whispered into existence by Irish Times journalist Harry McGee, wasn't just a clever turn of phrase, it was a stark observation. Since his release from prison in 1985, Hutch reportedly shed the trappings of typical gangland excess. No flashy cars, no ostentatious displays of wealth, no public revelry. Instead, a disciplined, almost ascetic lifestyle. This wasn't just personal preference, it was a calculated move. This understated approach, this ironclad self-control, became his ultimate weapon, a shield against scrutiny and a potent symbol of his unique power. While others flaunted, Hutch calculated. While others binged, Hutch schemed. This chilling discipline, they say, is the secret to his terrifying longevity. But make no mistake, beneath the veneer of the Monk beats the heart of the alleged leader of the infamous Hutch gang. This isn't some back-alley crew. This is a sprawling, Dublin-based organized crime group with tentacles reaching far across international borders. They are a force to be reckoned with, a syndicate of audacious ambition and ruthless efficiency. And for years, they've been known to the Irish public, sometimes with a dark, almost folkloric reverence, as if stepping straight out of a real-life Bugsy Malone. A criminal enterprise, certainly, but one with its own unique, chilling character, distinct from the rough-and-tumble street gangs. And Hutch's alleged exploits don't stop at gang leadership. For decades, his name has been synonymous with audacity, with legend-making heists that captivated a nation. He was, for a long time, the prime suspect in two of the most daring, most meticulously executed armed robberies in Irish history. These weren't amateur jobs. These were cinematic-level operations, requiring a chilling level of foresight, precision, and nerve. And Hutch's alleged exploits don't stop at gang leadership. For decades, his name has been synonymous with audacity, with legend-making heists that captivated a nation. He was, for a long time, the prime suspect in two of the most daring, most meticulously executed armed robberies in Irish history. These weren't amateur jobs. These were cinematic-level operations, requiring a chilling level of foresight, precision, and nerve. But then the blood feud, the war, the Kinahan-Hutch cartel conflict. This isn't just a rivalry, it's a saga of unbridled brutality, a modern-day gangland epic that has torn through the heart of Dublin and sent shockwaves across the globe. 18 murders, 18 souls extinguished in a relentless cycle of vengeance. Each bullet fired, each life taken, a grim tally in a conflict that seems to defy all reason and all end. And the spark that ignited this inferno? The event that plunged an already violent feud into unprecedented depths? February 2016, the Regency Hotel in Dublin. It was meant to be a boxing weigh-in, a public event. Instead, it became a battleground, a scene of shocking brazen violence played out in broad daylight. David Byrne, a high-ranking Kinahan associate, was gunned down in a hail of bullets. This wasn't just a murder, it was a public execution, a direct challenge, and a declaration of war on the Kinahan cartel. The images from that day, the chaos, the panic, the chilling efficiency of the attack, seared themselves into the national consciousness. It was a line crossed, an act so audacious that it screamed for retaliation, ensuring that the rivers of blood would continue to flow. The heat was on. The world watched, breathless, as the net slowly, inexorably tightened. And then, the biggest gamble, the ultimate showdown, unfolded in April 2023. After years of speculation, after an international manhunt, Jerry Hutch stood trial. The charge? Planning the cold-blooded murder of David Byrne at the Regency Hotel. This wasn't just any trial. It was a legal war, a high-stakes chess match played out in the Irish courts. Every detail was scrutinized, every witness grilled, as the prosecution sought to connect the monk directly to the Regency hit. The evidence was complex, often circumstantial, painting a picture of coded communications, alleged movements, and a desperate pursuit of justice. The trial itself was a spectacle, a legal cage match that dragged the darkest secrets of the underworld into the glaring light of day, captivating an entire nation and making headlines across Europe. After a grueling, tension-filled process, the verdict came down: acquittal, not guilty. The air crackled with disbelief. Was it a testament to his unbreakable will, his ability to evade the grasp of justice, or simply the agonizing complexity of prosecuting a man so deeply entrenched in a world of whispers and shadows? Regardless, it sent a powerful message. The monk remained elusive. The legal system had wrestled with the legend, and the legend, for now, had prevailed. Welcome to this special news feature, delving into the life, death, and enduring mystery surrounding the murder of former boxing champion and Trainspotting 2 actor Bradley Welsh. On the evening of April 17, 2019, 48-year-old Bradley Welsh was gunned down outside his luxury basement flat in Edinburgh's exclusive new town. Shot in the head at close range with a shotgun, his assassination was a calculated, premeditated act that stunned a city and left a deep scar on his family and friends. Welsh was a figure of contradictions, a man who had successfully sought redemption from a turbulent past. As a teenager in the 1980s, he was part of the notorious Hibernian FC hooligan gang, the Capital City Service, and spent 4 years in prison for firearms offenses and menacing an estate agent. But upon his release, he reinvented himself. In 1993, he was crowned British amateur lightweight boxing champion. By 2005, he had opened the Holyrood Boxing Gym, running classes for underprivileged children, and co-founded the charity Helping Hands, providing food bank collections, Christmas presents, and football coaching for the less well-off. His charity work was prolific. The Reverend Ian May of South Leith Parish Church would later recall Welsh donating over 20 tons of food, enabling 1,500 hampers for the city's poorest families. He even earned a place in the Guinness World Records in 2014, sparring with 360 opponents in 24 hours to raise £44,000 for the Sick Kids Foundation. A close friend of Trainspotting author Irvine Welsh, Bradley's new life took him into acting, playing the gang boss Mr. Doyle in the 2017 sequel, T2. He was seen as a role model, someone who had pulled himself up from tough beginnings in a council house in Morden. Yet, as he himself admitted, his past was a shadow he struggled to shake. On the night of the murder, Welsh had just returned from his gym. As he descended the steps to his flat, a man emerged from the shadows and fired the fatal shot. The gunman fled in a stolen Ford Kuga. Paramedics pronounced Bradley dead half an hour later. Inside the flat, his partner and 8-year-old daughter were initially unaware of the horror unfolding outside. The following month, 28-year-old Sean Orman was arrested and charged with the murder. In June, 7 weeks after his death, around 900 mourners, including Irvine Welsh, gathered for his funeral at Morton Hall Crematorium. Posters displayed his favorite motivational saying, "Tough times make monkeys eat red peppers." Orman stood trial at the High Court in Edinburgh in April 2021. He was found guilty not only of Welsh's murder but also of the attempted murder of businessman David McMillan in a machete attack a month prior. Sentencing Orman to life imprisonment with a minimum of 28 years, Judge Lord Beckett made a telling statement, calling the killing a premeditated and meticulously planned assassination, the ultimate reasons for which remain unknown to the court. The trial had heard claims that Orman carried out the hit on Welsh on the orders of an underworld figure for a fee of £10,000. He had done the same for the earlier attack on David McMillan. Orman, who was caught thanks to a tracker device in the stolen Ford Kuga and forensic evidence, was warned by the judge that he might never be released, even after the 28-year custodial term ended. Despite the conviction and sentence, the judge's words underscored the lasting enigma. What was the motive? It has been suggested that Welsh was inadvertently caught up in a feud between rival Edinburgh crime factions, who in turn had links to feuding crime families in Glasgow. More disturbingly, it later emerged that Police Scotland had been given warnings that Welsh's life was in danger, but those warnings were never passed on to him. The force later offered the Welsh family an unreserved apology, admitting high-ranking officers were aware of the threat but had deemed it not real or credible at the time. Former head of the Scottish Crime and Drugs Enforcement Agency, Graham Pearson, spoke on the difficulty people with links to organized crime can face when trying to break free of their past. He explained, "The key here is how do you break free? How do you create a distance between you and your past? There is no way that you can go halfway. You can't play inside and outside the game at the same time." He added that if a person appears to come and go with criminality, they can become fair game. The murder of Bradley Welsh stands as a powerful testament to the difficulty of escaping a past connected to the criminal underworld, no matter how hard one works to change. The killer, Sean Orman, is behind bars, but the identity of the person who paid for the hit and the full story of the ultimate motive remains the lasting, unanswered question in the assassination of Edinburgh's feared bad boy turned community champion. The date was November 24th, 2022. The place was Kilburn Drive, a quiet residential street in Wigan. It was a freezing cold, rainy Thursday evening. For residents of this peaceful enclave, the only worry was getting home out of the elements. But shortly before 7 p.m., a passerby made a horrific discovery: a body lying on the pavement. The scene that greeted the first police officers was unlike anything they'd encountered. The body was covered in a mysterious white powder, disfigured by an unknown substance. This wasn't just a homicide. It was immediately treated as a potential CBRN incident: chemical, biological, radioactive, nuclear. For Directive Gina Brennan and Detective Lee Shaw, the senior investigators, the case was instantly different. They couldn't even approach the body for the first 24 hours. They knew nothing, not the victim's identity, nor their gender. The crime scene was a toxic, bewildering enigma. Detective Ishaw knew the area, full of elderly residents and bungalows. It just didn't fit the bill, he recalled. The theories were desperate. Had the body fallen from a plane? Was this a body dump from another town? They were running blind. But there was one piece of luck, a recording from a nearby house. The recording captured a loud bang roughly 15 minutes before the body was found. It was a firearm. The killing happened right here, in this quiet spot. And with that knowledge, the victim was eventually identified. Liam Smith, a 38-year-old electrician and father of two. The post-mortem confirmed the calculated brutality. Liam had been shot in the face at close range, and then as he lay dying, doused in sulfuric acid and soda crystals. This wasn't random violence. This was a message. This was personal. Detective Brennan described it as a true whodunit. No witnesses, no known enemies, no immediate motive. The murder squad faced a monumental task: to find the person behind this military-grade execution. For 6 long weeks, the investigation was divided into 3 main lines of inquiry: Liam Smith's background, the weapon, and a specific vehicle. That vehicle was a dark Mitsubishi Shogun seen near the crime scene. This SUV was the killer's ghost. It had left very few tracks. They had the vehicle, but the registration plate was a known clone. It was a dead end until a detective reviewing dashcam footage hit the jackpot. A piece of footage from 3 weeks before the murder showed the same Shogun using a different cloned plate, R22 Aura. This single clue was the thread that would unravel the entire case. The plate led police to a man who had arranged its purchase, and that man led them to the killer, Michael Hillier, a 39-year-old drug dealer from Sheffield. The surveillance footage proved Hillier had traveled from Sheffield to Wigan 3 weeks before the killing for hostile reconnaissance, casing Liam Smith's house. On the day of the murder, he had sat waiting in the Shogun, armed for nearly 10 hours before luring Liam out. This was a patient, cold-blooded plan. Hillier was arrested. He answered no comment to every question. But a look into his car insurance policy revealed a second name registered to the vehicle: Rachel Fulstow. Rachel Fulstow, a 37-year-old property management worker from York, was brought in as a witness. Her first words were chilling. Before police could state the purpose of the interview, she asked, "Is this about Liam Smith?" Liam's identity had not been publicly confirmed. How did she know? Fulstow confessed she had known Liam. She told officers they had met on Tinder in 2019 and had a one-night stand, followed by lunch the next day. But Det Ins Shaw still remembers the phone call that provided the true motivation. Fulstow had claimed the sexual encounter was non-consensual. When she met Michael Hillier in 2021, she disclosed the incident to him. Hillier, who claimed he was besotted with her, was outraged. He claimed Fulstow told him she had been graphically raped. The pair made a catastrophic decision. They would not go to the police. They would seek justice themselves. In his testimony, Hillier stated, "We decided jointly we would deal with the matter ourselves and go down the vigilante route." It was a horrific vigilante plot, hatched over 10 months, culminating in a shotgun and acid attack. Hillier was the executioner, but the evidence would prove Fulstow was the architect, the planner, and the driving force. The case against Fulstow solidified with her digital footprint. Despite claiming innocence and fear of Hillier, her computer searches told a story of a woman deeply involved in the plot. Searches made days before the murder included, "How long does it take a car to burn?" A clear reference to the Shogun Hillier used and later torched. Another search was for Liam Smith's name on a local newspaper website before his identity was publicized. Even more damning were the searches made after the murder but before her arrest. Premeditated, and does acid corrode stainless steel? She was calculating the legal repercussions of their actions, not reacting out of shock. The ultimate act of callous disregard came just days after Liam Smith was brutally killed. Fulstow and Hillier flew to Jamaica together for a pre-planned 2-week holiday. While police worked tirelessly to identify the mystery body on the street, the killers were sunbathing. Within 4 weeks of her initial interview, Rachel Fulstow had moved from a witness to a full murder suspect. She was arrested, joining Hillier in custody. The pair, once partners in crime and in love, turned on each other during the trial. Hillier claimed Fulstow was the mastermind, constantly reminding him of the alleged rape to keep the vigilante plot on track. Fulstow claimed Hillier was an abusive drug dealer and she was simply too terrified to tell the truth. But the prosecution held the winning card, a covert recording of Hillier speaking candidly in prison. It was, as DCI Brennan said, an excellent piece of evidence, detailing everything both of them had done. The blame game was over. The jury quickly returned their verdicts. Both Michael Hillier and Rachel Fulstow were found guilty of murder. The presiding judge delivered a powerful statement. He described their murder of Liam Smith as brutal and cold-blooded. They had decided, he said, to act as judge, jury, and executioner. Michael Hillier, the gunman, was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 33 years in prison. Rachel Fulstow, the architect of the vigilante revenge plot, was jailed for a minimum of 30 years. The family of Liam Smith were finally given the answers they deserved, but his sister spoke of the added devastation of having his name tainted by the unproven accusations of the killers. Liam Smith was, as his family stated, the most kind soul, a devoted family man, robbed of his dignity and his life. The detectives connected deeply with the case. A man murdered in a quiet community, simply for a past encounter his killer couldn't tolerate. For DCI Brennan and DI Shaw, it was a demanding, complex investigation that started with nothing and was built piece by piece on a single cloned number plate. They had solved the most unusual of cases, an actual whodunit. The two vigilantes, who sought to exact their own distorted version of justice, will now spend the majority of their lives behind bars. But for Liam Smith's two boys, they will spend the rest of theirs without their dad.